For years, modern diet culture has practically declared war on a single grain. If you scroll through any social media feed today, you are instantly bombarded with the exact same aggressive warnings. Cut the carbs, drop the rice. Rice spikes your insulin. Rice is the reason you are carrying extra belly fat. We have been told, repeatedly and loudly, that this simple staple is the ultimate metabolic villain, but there is a glaring, almost undeniable flaw in that narrative, a flaw that completely shatters this modern dietary dogma.
It is a massive flaw, because when you actually look at the epidemiological data and historical records, some of the longest living, healthiest populations on the planet have consumed rice almost every single day of their lives. We are talking about traditional communities in Japan, Okinawa, rural China, parts of India, the Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand. These are cultures that historically consumed enormous amounts of carbohydrates, yet they maintained remarkably low rates of obesity and chronic metabolic diseases compared to the rapidly industrializing Western world.
Which brings us to the core of what we are unpacking today. It is a fascinating contradiction that completely breaks the rules of modern fitness influencers. We call it the Asian diet paradox. How can a food that is supposedly so dangerous be the foundational staple for populations that routinely live to see their 100th birthdays?
It is the ultimate nutritional mystery, isn't it? But to solve it, we have to stop looking at food through a microscope and start looking at the entire human ecosystem.
So let us tackle the most controversial question right out of the gate. Is rice actually unhealthy? Are millions of people poisoning their metabolisms bowl by bowl? Or have we entirely missed the point?
The short answer is no, absolutely not. Rice is not inherently dangerous. At its core, rice is simply a dense source of carbohydrates, which is energy. The problem we have today is that modern nutrition science, or at least the pop culture version of it, loves to isolate one single variable. We take a food, strip it of its cultural and environmental context, and judge it in a vacuum. It is like blaming the steering wheel for a car crash while ignoring the fact that the driver was blindfolded and speeding.
I love that metaphor. It highlights how reductionist we have become. We say, rice equals sugar, sugar equals bad, completely ignoring how that rice is actually being consumed.
Exactly. In traditional Asian diets, rice existed inside an entirely different physiological ecosystem. These populations were not eating rice alongside ultra-processed foods, they were not constantly snacking on hyper-palatable chips between meals, and they were not washing their dinners down with 30 grams of liquid sugar in a soda. Furthermore, they did not suffer from the chronic, sedentary behavior that defines modern office life.
They were moving, they were working.
Constantly. And the rice itself was rarely eaten alone. It was a vehicle for nutrient density. It was paired with a massive diversity of fibrous vegetables, legumes, fresh fish, and, crucially, fermented foods. When you combine complex carbohydrates with high fiber and active physical movement, the metabolic outcome is entirely different than eating a bowl of refined white rice while sitting on a couch.
But this is where the plot thickens. Because critics will point out that obesity, diabetes, and metabolic syndrome are currently exploding across Asia. So if rice isn't the villain, why are these health crises suddenly appearing in historically healthy rice-eating nations?
That is the westernization effect, and it is a crucial piece of the puzzle. The metabolic health of these nations did not suddenly collapse simply because rice existed. Rice has been there for thousands of years. What changed was the environment surrounding the rice.
The urbanization.
Precisely. Over the last few decades, we saw a massive shift. People moved from agrarian, active lifestyles into cities. They took sedentary desk jobs. Their sleep became disrupted by artificial light and modern stress. And most importantly, their food environment was flooded with ultra-processed foods, refined seed oils, and sugary beverages. The traditional diet was hijacked.
So the rice stayed on the plate, but everything else around it mutated.
Yes, blaming the rice for the sudden spike in diabetes is incredibly simplistic. Metabolism is not a simple math equation determined by one single food item. It is a highly complex biological symphony. It is influenced by your sleep architecture, your psychological stress, your daily movement, your muscle mass, your gut microbiome, and your total dietary pattern. When the entire system becomes inflamed and overwhelmed, the body loses its ability to process energy efficiently.
I want to zoom in on countries like India and the Philippines for a moment, because in these cultures, rice and carbohydrates are not just a side dish. They are the absolute center of the plate, the cultural and economic anchor of the meal.
They are foundational. Historically, rice was economical, it was highly adaptable, and it could sustain large families. But again, look at how it was traditionally utilized. A classic Indian thali or a traditional Filipino family meal was a masterclass in food synergy. The rice was balanced with lentils, spices, fermented vegetables, and healthy fats. It was a complete matrix of nutrition.
And it fueled a lifestyle that required immense physical output.
Exactly. But fast forward to today, the modern eating patterns in these rapidly developing urban centers often involve highly processed meats, deep-fried fast foods, late-night eating, and relentless chronic stress. The issue is not simply that people are eating rice. The issue is the overwhelming metabolic environment that has swallowed the rice whole.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room, the biological mechanism that everyone loves to fear. Insulin, you hear it everywhere. Rice spikes your insulin, and insulin makes you fat. People hear that and immediately assume insulin is some kind of toxic chemical roaming through their bloodstream.
That is arguably the most damaging misunderstanding in modern wellness culture. Insulin is not evil. Insulin is a critical survival hormone. Without insulin, humans die very quickly. Its primary job is to act like a key, opening the doors to your cells so that the energy you just consumed can enter and be used.
So, if insulin is just doing its job, where does the danger actually come from?
The danger comes from chronic metabolic overload, leading to insulin resistance. Imagine your muscle cells are like a sponge. When you are physically active, you wring that sponge out. It is empty, dry, and ready to absorb water. When you eat carbohydrates, insulin easily opens the door, and the muscle sponge effortlessly absorbs the glucose.
But what if you sit at a desk for 12 hours a day?
Then the sponge is already completely saturated. It cannot take in any more energy. So when you eat a massive carbohydrate meal, the glucose has nowhere to go. It backs up in the bloodstream. The body panics and pumps out more and more insulin, trying to force the doors open. Over time, the locks break. That is insulin resistance. And it is driven by sleep deprivation, high visceral fat, chronic stress, and ultra-processed diets. It is not caused simply because you ate a carbohydrate.
That fundamentally shifts the perspective. It explains why a highly active person or someone with significant muscle mass handles carbohydrates completely differently than someone who is metabolically compromised.
Precisely. Muscle mass is your body's primary metabolic sink for glucose. Active bodies process carbohydrates with incredible efficiency. Sedentary, stressed bodies do not.
This ties perfectly into the longevity aspect, because when we look at the true blue zones, places like Okinawa, we see older populations thriving, staying active, and remaining sharp well into their 90s. And they are certainly not eating low-carb diets.
Far from it. The traditional Okinawan diet was incredibly high in carbohydrates, predominantly from purple sweet potatoes and rice. But let us look at the context of their longevity. Their diets were naturally moderate in calories. They had immense plant diversity, which fed a robust gut microbiome. They had very low intakes of ultra-processed foods.
And they had a profound sense of community, the social aspect of eating.
Yes, the concept of moai, a lifelong social support group, plus the practice of harahachi-bu, eating until you are 80% full. Long-term health and healthy aging are influenced by a massive web of factors: diet quality, social connection, daily low-intensity movement, and low systemic inflammation. Modern diet culture became obsessed with isolating a single villain fat in the 90s, carbs in the 2000s, sugar today, instead of trying to understand this beautiful metabolic complexity.
We want a simple enemy to fight. It is much easier to say ban rice than it is to say fix your sleep, manage your stress, walk more, and rebuild your connection to real food.
Biology rarely behaves in simplistic absolutes, and the science is finally starting to catch up to this reality. We are now seeing incredible research revealing that people respond entirely differently to the exact same foods.
This is the era of personalized medicine, right? The idea that universal diet dogma is actually obsolete.
Completely obsolete. Emerging studies utilizing continuous glucose monitors are showing highly individualized glucose responses. You and I could sit down, eat the exact same bowl of rice, and have completely different physiological reactions.
What drives that difference? If the food is identical, why does my blood sugar crash while yours stays perfectly stable?
It comes down to your unique biological fingerprint. It is influenced by the specific bacteria in your gut microbiome. It is influenced by your genetics, your current muscle mass, and your metabolic flexibility. But it is also heavily influenced by transient factors. How well did you sleep last night? What is your current psychological stress level? Cortisol, the stress hormone, directly impairs your body's ability to handle glucose.
So the stress of fearing the food might actually be making the biological response to the food worse.
That is a very real physiological phenomenon. If you eat a meal in a state of high sympathetic nervous system, arousal, fight or flight, your digestion shuts down and your glucose spikes. The future of nutrition is not going to be found in a one-size-fits-all internet diet. It is going to be found in personalized metabolic intelligence.
Which brings us to the cutting edge of how we actually measure and understand this. This is where wearable technology and health intelligence platforms fundamentally change the paradigm. Because modern health is no longer just about tracking what you put into your mouth. It is about deeply understanding how your specific body responds to it.
Exactly. For decades, we were flying blind. We followed generalized rules and hoped for the best. But now, with advanced wearables, we have a dashboard for our biology. We are tracking metrics like heart rate variability, detailed sleep architecture, resting heart rate, and daily recovery scores.
And how does that data actually protect us from the pitfalls of modern diet culture?
It provides context. These metrics reveal the invisible state of your nervous system. They tell you whether your body is resilient, recovering well, and primed to handle physiological stress, or whether it is strained, inflamed, and metabolically exhausted. If your wearable shows that your heart rate variability is tanked and you got 3 hours of deep sleep, your body is essentially screaming that it is in a state of metabolic gridlock.
Meaning, that is probably not the day to overload your system with heavy meals, regardless of what the food is.
Precisely. You learn to align your behavior with your biology. You stop blindly following food trends and start listening to the objective data your body is producing. It is the ultimate form of preventative medicine.
It is empowering. It shifts you from being a passive consumer of diet advice to an active participant in your own physiology. As we wrap this up, it feels like we have come full circle. We started by looking at a grain of rice, and we ended up looking at the entire architecture of modern human life.
Because that is where the truth always hides. In the broader context,
perhaps rice was never the true problem. Perhaps the real issue was what modern life became around the food. The relentless overstimulation, the industrialization and ultra-processing of our food supply, the chronic sleep disruption, the unavoidable stress, the fact that we engineered movement out of our daily lives, leading to a state of perpetual metabolic overload.
We blamed the grain, but we should have been looking at the environment. Some of the healthiest, most vibrant populations in human history ate rice daily, but they lived within fundamentally different biological and social environments. The greatest lesson we can take from the Asian diet paradox is that health cannot be hacked by simply eliminating one macronutrient. The future of health intelligence is about learning to understand patterns, respecting your physiology, and cultivating an environment where your body can actually thrive.
We need to stop chasing simplistic dietary villains. Health is not built from fear. It is built from understanding.
Could not have said it better. When you understand your biology, you no longer have to fear your food.
This has been a deep dive into the intersection of neuroscience, nutrition, recovery science, wearables, and the future of medicine. Keep questioning the dogma, keep observing your own data, and continue exploring what true health means for you.
We will see you in the next episode.